Following the capture of Acre in 1191, King Richard I of England knew that securing the port of Jaffa was crucial before making an attempt on Jerusalem. In August, he led his army south along the coast, fully aware that Saladin would do everything possible to prevent the Crusaders from reaching their goal. Saladin quickly mobilized his forces, determined to stop the Christian advance. Richard organized his march with precision. After capturing much of the Egyptian fleet at Acre, he had little to fear from the sea, allowing him to use the coastline as a natural defensive barrier. He moved cautiously, mindful of the mistakes of past campaigns. Knowing that heat and dehydration posed the greatest dangers to his men, Richard advanced at a steady pace, marching only in the mornings and resting near sources of water. His fleet followed closely, supplying the army and providing refuge for the wounded. Saladin's forces continuously harassed the Crusaders with swift hit-and-run attacks, attempting to break their formation. Muslim chronicler Baha al-Din, who witnessed the march, described how the Muslim archers rained arrows on the Crusaders, hoping to provoke them into reckless charges. However, Richard's strict discipline held his men together, preventing disorder. The Christian crossbowmen returned fire, their bolts proving far more deadly than the lighter arrows of Saladin's troops. Frankish infantry marched on, seemingly unfazed by the arrows lodged in their armor, while Muslim cavalry suffered heavy losses under the relentless crossbow fire. The Crusader army's progress was dictated by its slow-moving infantry and baggage train, while Saladin's predominantly mounted forces enjoyed greater mobility. Attempts to burn crops and starve Richard's army failed, as the fleet kept them well supplied. From August 26th to 29th, Saladin's forces temporarily lost contact with the Crusaders as both armies maneuvered towards Jaffa. By early September, Saladin realized that his small raids were not enough to halt Richard's advance. He decided to commit his full army to a decisive engagement. Saladin's opportunity came when the Crusaders had to cross the dense forest of Arsuf, a rare wooded region along the Palestinian coast. The cover of the trees allowed Saladin to mask his troop movements and prepare an ambush. The Crusaders made it halfway through the forest without incident and camped on September 6th, their position protected by a marsh at the mouth of the Nahr al-Fali River. Estimates suggest that Saladin commanded around 25,000 men, almost all cavalry, while Richard's forces consisted of approximately 10,000 infantry and 1,200 heavy cavalry. following day, as the Crusaders resumed their march, Saladin launched his attack. His army emerged from the woods in a fierce assault. The front lines consisted of Bedouin and Sudanese archers, along with Turkish horse archers who showered the Crusaders with arrows. Behind them stood the elite heavy cavalry, including Saladin's Mamluk guards, Kurdish warriors, and contingents from Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia. The battle followed a familiar pattern. Saladin's archers and skirmishers tried to weaken the Crusader formation, but Richard's disciplined ranks held firm. When the initial barrage failed, Saladin focused his assault on the Crusader rear, where the Knights Hospitaller were positioned. Under immense pressure, the Hospitallers pleaded for permission to charge, but Richard ordered them to hold their ground. He knew the Saracen cavalry needed to exhaust themselves before his knights launched a counterattack. However, either due to impatience or acting on delegated authority, the Hospitaller Marshal and one of Richard's knights, Baldwin of Carron, suddenly led a charge into the Saracen ranks, shouting, "St. George!" Inspired by their example, the rest of the Hospitallers followed, as did the French knights positioned ahead of them. Realizing that a counterattack was now inevitable, Richard gave the signal for a full-scale charge. The sudden shift from defense to attack shocked Saladin's men. Muslim chroniclers noted the terrifying ferocity of the Crusader knights, who had endured hours of attacks before exploding into action. Many of Saladin's cavalry had dismounted to fire their bows more effectively, leaving them vulnerable. The Crusaders cut down their enemies with brutal efficiency, avenging the torment they had suffered earlier in the battle. Saladin's army collapsed into a full retreat. Knowing the dangers of overextending against an army trained in fluid, hit-and-run tactics, Richard halted the pursuit after 1.5 kilometers. Freed from immediate pressure, some of Saladin's troops regrouped and launched counterattacks, with his nephew, Taqi al-Din, leading 700 elite cavalry in a desperate attempt to turn the tide. The Crusaders repelled the assault, driving the Saracens back for good. By the battle's end, an estimated 700 Crusaders lay dead, while Saladin's forces had lost around 7,000 men. Though not a complete annihilation, The defeat was humiliating for Saladin and severely weakened his ability to defend Palestine. In the aftermath, he was forced to abandon and destroy many of his fortresses in the region, recognizing that he could not hold them against the Crusaders. Despite their victory at Arsuf, the Crusaders ultimately failed to retake Jerusalem. However, the battle shifted the balance of power. Saladin was forced to negotiate, and in 1192, the Treaty of Jaffa was signed. The agreement allowed Christian pilgrims to visit Jerusalem while recognizing Crusader control over the coastline, including Jaffa. Both sides, exhausted by the war, accepted the truce. Richard, needing to return to Europe to defend his lands from King Philip of France, left Palestine in ruins, but with the Crusaders still holding a strong foothold along the coast.